The world-famous inventor, Nikola Tesla, in April 1899, together with engineer Leonard Curtis, decided to create a research station near the Colorado Springs resort. Although they were even promised to help with a constant supply of energy, the most significant moment for Tesla was the opportunity to study the frequent thunderstorms with powerful lightning storms that often rage in the territory of Colorado Springs. Today you will recognize him. What came of it? Electric element of heaven. Let's start with the fact that this proposal to create a research station belonged to Curtis. Having agreed to it, Tesla, along with several employees, arrived in Colorado Springs. He was very interested in the idea of experimentally studying the possibility of wireless transmission of information and energy over long distances. And for such purposes, he just needed quite powerful lightning discharges. Having arrived at the site, active work began on creating the station, and all the necessary laboratory equipment was imported. Very little time passed when Nikola Tesla already knew a lot of information about lightning, still continuing to admire the violent riot of the electrical element of the heavens. The inventor was not even too upset about the first failed experiment carried out using a lightning receiver. And this despite the fact that strong lightning practically destroyed the completed construction of the station, and all due to insufficient grounding. Of course, this was a sudden intervention of nature in the construction of the laboratory. However, Tesla at that moment was able to test his own assumptions about the processes of accumulation of atmospheric electricity. Moreover, the researcher also drew attention to one very unusual fact. All his instruments showed more powerful fluctuations in the ground potential during distant discharges than those that were nearby. This oddity greatly interested the inventor, and he spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. Then one thought came to the scientist, which he had previously driven away from himself. It's just that Tesla previously believed that it was impossible to use the Earth to transmit electricity over long distances. But now it turned out to be more than real to him. To succeed, it was necessary to create standing waves in the Earth, causing their appearance by changing the Earth's potential. Perhaps this is exactly the phenomenon that was once seen in a laboratory in Colorado Springs. Let's look at this in more detail. Pulse of the Earth. Since the research station was connected to the El Paso power line, Nikola began to prepare for an extremely important and no less dangerous experiment. By the way, Tesla had an assistant named Fritz Lowenstein, who described this experience with the following words. I stood near the switchboard switch, and Nikola opened the entrance door of the station in order to be able to simultaneously observe what was happening inside and outside the room. Namely, the masked ball arrestor. It was a powerful effect. A huge amount of lightning in the form of spark discharges occurred in the windings of the secondary coil, as well as at the top of the mast. The phenomenon was repeated over and over again when, on the instructions of the scientist, I turned the switch on and off here. Also in his notes of what was happening, Fritz Lowenstein wrote that when Tesla asked him to turn on the switch and not turn it off. Just a few seconds later there was a ringing silence. The scientist initially thought that the assistant had turned the switch off again. But as it turned out a little later, the research station was completely disconnected from the promised electricity. Upset, Nikola immediately called the resort station. He wanted to express all his dissatisfaction, but what he heard shocked him. It turned out that he and his assistant simply burned the generator because of the experiment. And the angry voice from the receiver said, Tesla, you will never receive electricity from us again. Of course, no one expected such an outcome. Although Tesla carefully thought out the plan of the experiment, and also calculated all his current equipment, the power plant generator was not ready for such an overload. It was for this reason that its winding burned out to ashes. The management of the resort station no longer wanted to connect the line to another generator, and also warned the scientist about the need to repair the burnt equipment. Of course, the repairs took time, at least 30 days. But Nikola, due to his natural charm, managed to persuade the administration to entrust him with the management of the repair process. and I must admit, he really was able to organize the work in the best possible way. As a result of this, the generator started working within 7 days, and after only 3 days, he was allowed to resume his experiment. Thanks to this, the fundamental possibility of causing the phenomenon of electrical resonance in the Earth, as well as obtaining standing waves, was soon confirmed. As the scientist himself believed, such, in his words, electrical vibrations of the ether, accomplished by intensity, were connected at some point diametrically opposite Colorado, approximately near the French islands of Amsterdam and St. Paul, between 70 and 80 degrees east longitude. When the secondary waves returned back to Colorado Springs, they were amplified by a resonance system and then radiated back. The mysticism of electro-ethereal mirages. I think it's worth mentioning another very important circumstance that was not included in the official reports. However, it is absolutely certain that it took place, since Tesla himself described it in his personal diaries. What was it? In fact, this is the part of Fritz Lowenstein's recording and reporting that was excluded from the description of the experiment, after it became clear that the power had gone out everywhere and all research instruments had stopped. We are talking about a resonator ball on the emitter mast, which was shrouded in a blue glow, like some kind of fantastic liquid that flowed down in waves, disappearing with a hiss on the grounded surface of the roof and research station. At that moment, Fritz pulled out an additional section of the telescopic tower. Due to this, these waves changed the direction of movement, flowing back into the flaming ball. After this, there was a booming explosion of thunder, causing everyone present to have their ears blocked. But this was not the end of the experiment. The ball at the end of the mast burst, scattering into thousands of small fragments. From the smoky aureole of the explosion, some strange and incomprehensible picture of an alien landscape suddenly appeared. But, at least, this is how the brilliant scientist Nikola Tesla and his assistant described it all in their works. If you believe this story, then Tesla made Fritz promise that he would not reveal the shocking results of the experiment in Colorado Springs ahead of time. It so happened that for some time they together kept secret the phenomenon of ethereal electrical mirage they discovered. After this event, Tesla began to build a theory of this phenomenon, believing that when the air capacity of the resonator changed, somewhere hundreds of miles away on the ocean coast, the antinodes of two waves overlapped. Nikola suggested that this was what caused the transfer of the distant image, in some miraculous way. But Fritz Lowenstein did not agree with his mentor. Because he saw that the color of the sea and the rocks had some special color, and above the smooth surface of the oily waves, he saw two moons, one of them 10 times larger than usual. It sounds poetic, doesn't it? But in fact these were the real words of the scientist and his assistant, recorded in personal diaries. By the way, regarding this phenomenon, Nikola Tesla at first thought that this was nothing more than a mirage distortion of the real landscape, the West Coast. Top secret. Just at this time, Nikola Tesla discovers absolutely inexplicable knowledge about phenomena that no one had previously known or explored. And we must admit that the list of further studies of the scientist is simply amazing in its depth and breadth, even taking into account his frequent insights and brilliant intuition. And what is more surprising is how the inventor could calculate and then select the parameters of his installations using the mental design method, and the effects from them, as you yourself understand, were absolutely amazing. Many other researchers could not logically explain such talents of Tesla, so they believed that the scientist found his scientific and technical solutions to various situations by immersing himself in his consciousness in a kind of twilight borderline state. Supposedly this is how he could draw information from a single information field of our planet. But how can such assumptions be justified? But they, as a rule, are explained by the fact that Tesla showed interest in the subtle world of the electrical ether, of which he was a promoter. The scientist believed that the radio waves of his devices diverged there. It was there that he received signals from alien intelligence. Based on the records of the inventor, he wanted to establish contact with the inhabitants of other civilizations using electrical vibrations of the ether. Tesla was undoubtedly a man of action, and therefore began to create all the necessary equipment and special equipment. And yet, Nikolov kept everything strictly and secret, and even years later he spoke very delicately on this topic, as if afraid to mention some unnecessary detail. As you might have guessed, all of his assistants present during the unusual experiments promised to remain silent about what happened at the experimental station in Colorado Springs. The only information that survived was the mention that Tesla received clearly artificial radio signals of unknown origin, and it is believed that their source could be the well-known red planet. Unfortunately, it is unlikely that it will ever be possible to restore a complete picture of what is happening in Colorado Springs, since Nikola Tesla did not write down some, relying on his phenomenal memory, and much was completely lost after his death. That's all for today. Don't forget to rate the video, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for your attention and bye.